Grace Converse is a master student in art history at master student in art history at Purchase College and State University of New York, where she is also the Neuberger Curatorial Fellow. Her scholarship deals with how technological developments contribute to new artistic practices, so keeping the theme with digital weaving before this, how they shape theories of art and alter the perception of art objects. Her paper today, Beyond Material Mimicry, Art and the Public Image of Plastic, derives from the work she has done curating an upcoming exhibition, Plastic Art in an Era of Material Innovation, at the Neuberger Museum of Art. So please welcome Grace Converse.
Thank you, Ethan, and I just also want to thank everybody who helped put the symposium together today. And I also just want to thank Professor Miko for his talk yesterday, but also for his scholarship on plastic, because it's been a huge help to me. And one note, I apologize for some of the images. I took them hastily in my research and really with my iPhone and never intended them to be this large. So you'll see when they come up, but some of them are a little, not professional. In September 1971, the Society of Plastics Engineers outlined, quote, the value of art to industry in their journal, noting that 12 major art shows had been produced since 1966, and declaring that scarcely a month goes by during the New York City art season when a gallery or two does not feature the work of an artist or a group of artists who work in plastics. The article continues with an imperative. The plastic industry should know what is happening in the world of art and take what practical steps it can to encourage those who work in plastics. If good commercial design has its roots in the fine arts, it is common sense to keep those roots well nurtured. 4 of the exhibitions of the 12 grew from partnerships between plastics producing companies and arts institutions, including Plastic is Plastic at New York's Museum for Contemporary Craft in 1968, which was co-produced with Hoover Chemical Company and supported by Roman Haas. The 1969-70 touring exhibition that went from the Jewish Museum, the Milwaukee Art Center, and then to the San Francisco Museum of Art, which was called A Plastic Presence. And that was sponsored by Philip Morris and its subsidiary Millprint, Inc. Trio, which was an exhibition of plastic works by Frank Gallo, Eva Hesse, and Tony DeLapp, which took place at the Owens Corning Fiberglass Center here in Manhattan in 1970, which was produced by the company as well. And finally, the last plastic show, which was at the California Institute of Art and was produced in 1972 with the Hastings Plastic Company. Catalog essays, correspondences between artists and institutions and industry, and some press touted the exceptionability of this new material technology and presented artists as holding the keys to unlocking its potential. Amidst the many new formal and marketable qualities of plastics, durability, price, shape, weight, disposability, and so forth, its capacity for chromatic diversity was consistently promoted. However, artists' intentions regarding the use of plastic's many colors differed from how companies leveraged color for marketing purposes. For artists who participated in industry-sponsored exhibitions of plastic art, including those I will discuss here, Frederick Eversley, Tony DeLapp, Frank Gallo, Eva Hesse, Lyra Lammis, Les Levine, Louise Nevelson, and Andy Warhol, colored plastics provided a means to manifest previously unmet aesthetic and theoretical goals. Works of art conveyed nuances in the meaning of color and material that mass-produced objects could not, communicating that previously unimaginable colored shapes now existed, offered only a superficial explanation for why these objects were and are valuable. As a result, the response to exhibitions presented with corporate backing reflected a diminished value on formal aspects of the work. The importance of color in the industry's marketing is evident in Roman Haas's 1967 brochure, Plexiglass, these are the artists, Plexiglass in Architecture. And this is one of those photos that I took myself. On the cover, an array of colored squares hover around the title text. The solid white background for this graphic, the thin sans serif black lettering, and the contrast between the different hues emphasize the pattern's variegation. The squares and the shape they make together echo the architecture comprised of geometric panels of plexiglass that lay within the pages. The colors on the cover may spark readers' imaginings of brilliant new environments. The reader then learns that decorative colored plexiglass also serves as a structural element and as a shield from the sun. Roman Haas and their product plexiglass are significant because the company was one of the few chemical companies that did not outright reject the Museum of Contemporary Crafts' solicitation for support of their exhibition, Plastic as Plastic. Roman Haas offered limited technical and financial support to the museum, which indicates that the company believed plexiglass could have broad applications in creative fields. Additionally, attention from an art and design audience could, in turn, help brand plexiglass as chic and innovative. Roman Haas's emphasis on the broad color spectrum of their product speaks to the fact that plexiglass and other hard acrylics was technically easier to color and thus available in more shades than other plastics. However, a more colorful home could be marketed as different, but this alone could not alter the public perception that plastic options merely served as alternatives to pre-existing structures or products. A plexiglass window, even in bright orange, is still a window. No plastic, however, was immune to this plight. A green melamine plate is still a surface to eat off of, and a translucent green umbrella still serves the purpose of keeping its user dry. Altering the color of a pre-existing object did not change the function of the object, and advertising the many other advantages of plastics was not sufficient evidence that plastics were independent or radically different from the materials that they replaced. Based on the support for art, it is clear that the industry believed entirely new objects were needed to evince the virtuosity of these new synthetic plastics. Artists had the freedom to experiment with colorful forms and were able to transcend the boundaries of functionality that drove the creation of plastic forms and new materials. While the makers of plexiglass set their sights on the architectural applications of the material, artists increasingly took to the material because of its innate properties. And this is just some Leroy Lamas screenshot from Google. With colorful, transparent plastics, artists saw an opportunity to explore light transmission, refraction, and reflection, and forms with intrinsic color. Leroy Lamas, who participated in many of the plastic-specific exhibitions, championed the material. He used it extensively and created his plexiglass construction series during the formative years of his career in the early to mid-60s. Plexiglass afforded Lamas the means to include color without adulterating the surface of the work, thus preserving the eminence of the material. He speaks of, quote, the way in which it transmits light as advantageous, but unlike glass, it is much more sculptural. He describes how the material, quote, requires nothing less than perfection, and that it has a, quote, unique optical effect. He shows deference and fascination for the material, describing it as, quote, a beautiful thing in itself. It isn't a leaf, it isn't a woman, it's itself. By layering different colored rectangular plexiglass prisms, as you see here, within one another, he also explored the transformations light undergoes through translucent colors. Lamas's structures house his reverence for the material and his goal of drawing attention to plexiglass in and of itself. For Louise Nevelson, working with plexiglass came after years of working with wood painted monochrome black, gold, or white. Unlike Lamas, she was relatively detached from the material. For her, plastic was one of many materials to be experimented with. Brooke Rappaport describes how, quote, these plexiglass boxes differ from the labored intensity of the wood boxes as their subject is light rather than light and shadow. In this, she aligns with Lammas. Both found the material's transparency to be one of its greatest assets. In Canada Series 2, which you see on the left, and then a similar one is Canada Series 3 on the right. In 1968, rows of clear rectangular boxes are stacked together. Each box is affixed to the other with small metal pieces. Inside these boxes are varying clear but curvilinear shapes. Light reflects most strongly around the points where holes for screws or bolts have been drilled into the plastic, and the elements of the sculpture that are visible via light reflections are decidedly white. So you don't see something that's clear. By adopting plexiglass, Nevelson could continue to create abstract sculptural works that were monochromatic while experimenting with the transmission of light through a structure. Nevelson's Atmosphere and Environment 7, which is on the left, is a monochrome black plexiglass, sometimes it's listed as lucite, sculpture whose title, color, and form are affiliated with Atmosphere and Environment 10, which is the well-known 1969-70 public outdoor sculpture, which is at Princeton University. So despite the choice of cheap material, her monochrome works in plastic remain associated with the highly appraised black, white, and gold work in her of wood and metal sculptures. This suggests more broadly that achromatic works may more easily invite connotations of cultural elitism typically associated with fine art. The negative associations of plastic as cheap, commercial, and industrial, combined with those of bright colors as whimsical, sinful, childish, unsophisticated, chaotic, could be assuaged by avoiding color entirely. So numerous artists, including Lammas here, who participated in industry-sponsored exhibitions, such as Nevelson, Mon Levinson, Ed McGowan, and William Ryman, often chose to make solid black, white, or clear work, perhaps in an effort to elevate the status of their work. On the opposing end of the literal spectrum are artists such as Frederick Eversley, who readily embraced the full chromatic scale of plastics. In the 1960s and early 70s, Eversley produced a series of curved, polished, translucent, and colorful polyester resin sculptures intended to transmit and manipulate light that he termed lenses. And I just liked this from his website because it shows a chromatic scale in a really kind of lovely way. So the name lenses describes both the shape of each sculpture and its relationship to light. In these works, which range in scale from approximately 1 foot to 4 feet or so in diameter, light is altered as it passes through rings of multiple colors. In one, deep red merges with golden orange, and another, dark blue fades to nearly colorless in the center. The polished concavities reflect distorted images and reformed rays of light. Light and color are far more than formal components for Eversley. Light is energy, the continuation of a wave that has its origin in the sun. It strikes our planet and fuels the creation of life and all its resources. His lenses collect and focus the energy of natural light into a colorful core. The formal characteristics of his works thus emulate or represent the vast structure of this energy spectrum. Refracted light casts a rainbow, and reflected light reveals a surface's color. With polyester resin, Eversley was able to create solid objects in a range of densities that transmit light through translucent bands of intrinsic color. Eversley's work is distinct from the previously discussed artists because they are multicolored solids. So while Lammas and others created multicolored works, the individual component parts of each of those works were uniform solid colors. So one surface would be, one color. By combining multiple colors in one unified body, Eversley demonstrated a fuller extent of plastic's chromatic capacities. Eversley, Lammas, and Nevelson created works that are self-contained, specific, even if they're serial, and permanent. These artists focused more on the physical properties of the material than on the broader evocations of plastics. Their work does not intentionally call attention to the presence of plastic in society. Les Levine, however, approached plastic more holistically. Known as Plastic Man, he expressed in his work the ubiquity, inherent disposability, and ephemerality of plastic while still emphasizing particular material properties. So in the piece Body Color, which you see here, which was included in the exhibition Plastic is Plastic, tall, vacuum-formed, uniformly shaped bubble-like plastic panels in varying colors are arranged one next to another to form an undulating, multicolored plastic environment. So viewers actually can walk through the environment, and they may look through these colored plastic bubbles, and then they would see everybody, everything in different color. And viewers on the outside could look in and see the people walking through in different colors. So the viewer inside a bubble looks out at a tinted world. So the viewer, in both senses, has embodied plastic. They are either colored by it extrinsically or have the experience of seeing their surroundings differently. So it's just in both. So you have body color falls into the category of disposable sculptural plastic plastic structures that Levine calls places. So which with much less grandeur than environment, installation, or even space, and with evocations of common ubiquitous realms, place encompasses the nature of plastic and appropriately describes his disposable bubble structures. By emphasizing the ephemerality and plebeian nature of the material, Levine reinforces the very characteristics of plastics that the industry hoped fine art would eschew and underscores the history of objects made available en masse in plastic. Levine embraced the material's connotation as cheap and pedestrian by allowing works to be purchased easily and discarded freely. And as a note, someone who was working on the exhibition Plastic is Plastic left one of the panels in a taxi and could not recover it, as an aside. So anyway, pop artists, including Andy Warhol, also embraced plastic's cultural connotations. Easily replicable, colorful plastic objects extended the scope of the duplicated image into 3 dimensions. In the 1968 Portfolio 10 from Leo Castelli, which contains a number of 3-dimensional prints, the portfolio contains a number of 3-dimensional prints made using a variety of types of plastics, and including Andy Warhol's portraits of the artists. The work consists of 100 plastic boxes, each approximately 2 inches square. So each one of these is an individual box. You can actually take them out and rearrange them, and it's kind of fun if you're in storage with it. So there are 10 sets of boxes, and each in a different hue. Warhol printed a portrait of each artist represented in the editioned Castelli portfolio on each color. So there are 10 different colored portraits of Frank Stella, for example, and 10 different portraits of Warhol himself. The colors of the boxes are not restricted to any recognizable or pre-existing chromatic system, such as the rainbow or primary colors, and are thus seemingly arbitrarily selected from the potentially limitless colors of plastic. The repeated forms, available as repeated editions in Warhol's work, and the repetition of rapidly produced panels in Levine's work speaks to the fact that plastic is, as Roland Barthes describes, ubiquity made visible. Conventional standards of art evaluation challenge whether value exists in repeated, replicable objects made of an everyday material. Using art to establish the value and cultural merit of plastic was further complicated by the fact that works of art and functional plastic objects were exhibited together. The inherent value of a singular or limited edition art object was then undermined by its proximity to objects produced en masse. In Plastic is Plastic, which that's the installation view, and then these are some slides that accompanied the exhibition, or were shown in preparation for the exhibition. In Plastic is Plastic, works of art were presented in the same manner and space as inflatable furniture, which you see here, elaborate jewelry, toilets. This is a portable toilet and necklace, a faucet, and this is a work by Armand, a washing machine agitator, and that's another Les Levine work. And this is Amon Levinson, and that's Roman Haas grill something. So with industrial materials as well. So this muddled the message. Were new plastic materials with many functional applications, or were they impractical for daily use, but exceptional for art experiments? The curatorial choices incidentally blurred the boundaries around the categories of sculpture, decor, industrial design, architecture, furniture, land art, science experiment, and even performance. Likewise, the viewer's role was conflated with their role as consumer. Retail prices for certain objects were included in labels or description, but not for works of art. And yet all objects were presented under the conventional do not touch museum rule. One viewer griped that she wanted to be able to sit on or touch the furniture since she could easily go do so at Macy's, and did not understand why an object that was meant for a consumer use was put on a pedestal, so to speak. So curatorial choices were partially to blame for the conflation of art and product, but artist-creators were also ambiguous about the definition of objects. As one example, a catalog of work by the artist-designer Dick Seeger, whose work was included in the exhibition Plastic as Plastic, includes aphoristic poetics written by the artist about the meanings of the gallery, of the artist, of art, and plastic, which you see here. And then interspersed through the pages of images and text are price lists for all of the objects, and an order form accompanies the catalog, which are here. So anyone could have purchased one of his decorative art objects in a number of color combinations, including blues and violets, blues and greens, or hot pink, orange, and reds at varying lengths. So these are like strands of beads, basically, between 2 feet and 6 feet long, for around $17.50 to $50. So Seeger's categorization of his work is unclear. His words cast an ostentatious gravitas of fine art over the work, while the price list diminish the objects to store-bought trinkets. However, the 2 colored cubes that were exhibited in the Museum of Contemporary Craft in their exhibition were not available for purchase to the viewers. But had these objects actually been included as sculptures at the Jewish Museum's exhibition of Plastic Presents, editions of them might have been available for sale, because as part of that exhibition, the museum included 53 editioned works of art by 47 artists. This is a list that accompanied it, and you can see some of the artists are, most of the artists that were included, and Eversley is on here, and Hess is on here, and again, this is one of the ones I took with my phone, sorry. But a press release about this portion of the exhibition states that purchase orders will be taken and forwarded to lending galleries during the length of the exhibition. With Plastic, Walter Benjamin's age of mechanical reproduction bloomed into an age of potentially unlimited, identical, 3-dimensional replicas with identical auras. The replication of much art made with plastic reinforces the notion that it is cheap and disposable, opening a Pandora's box of issues around the material value of a work. By sponsoring or co-producing exhibitions of art made with plastic, chemical companies cast works of art with a halo of inauthenticity, or worse, of the consumer products they produced. Thus, the inherent value of art in plastic lay in either the concept of the work or the innovative craftsmanship involved in making the work. For the 1970s exhibition Trio at the Owens Corning Fiberglass Company, presented the 1970 exhibition Trio presented the work of Eva Hesse, Frank Gallo, and Tony DeLapp as innovative uses of fiberglass and reinforced plastic. The artist's specific processes and reasons for choosing particular plastics served as evidence that materials produced by Owens Corning spurred reinvention of skills and techniques. The lumpy sinews that comprise certain works by Hesse, the naturalistic female figures that form a large portion of Gallo's oeuvre, or DeLapp's bold geometric sculptures, each represent innovations in fabrication. Lawrence Alloway, in his essay introducing the exhibition, underscores this point and speaks to a departure from the typical associations or uses of plastic in art. Plastic's acceptance in art, he says, quote, has not been complete. Artists did not reject the material, but maintain, quote, a certain reserve about their use in art that followed what he describes as a monopolization over the material by, quote, geometric abstract artists who, quote, undoubtedly overemphasized effects of transparency and of sharp, hard edges at the expense of other possibilities. So he's kind of bemoaning Lammas in this instance. DeLapp, Gallo, and Hesse exemplify modes of working that offer, quote, a, quote, completely different set of formal opportunities. In his analysis, Alloway posits that DeLapp's integration of fiberglass into his works beginning around 1966 aided the artist's capacity to work with reflective surfaces and colors that have the luster of hot rods. DeLapp's geometry is, quote, decidedly playful without the modernist gloss that earlier uses of high-finish plastics sometimes reveal. The gloss in DeLapp's sculptures evokes popular colorful items of the time frequently produced with fiberglass, surfboards, boats, modern home furnishings, and of course, hot rods. Rather than purely presenting form for form's sake in a minimalist sense or challenging optical perception in the way artists might have, DeLapp's colored Chinese centralized geometric sculptures reflect the culture of California. Gallo immortalized certain participants of this California culture, notably Raquel Welch, in the form of slightly jaundiced, nude, or scantily clad epoxy figures. Realistic human forms made of plastic undermine the notions about the material's exclusive use in industry and mass production. The surface of these figures has the sheen of many plastics, yet it is ruddy and inconsistent, providing evidence of the human hand. In these sculptures, the flesh, that in a sculpture from another era might have been white marble or dark bronze or naturalistically painted wood, is a pale yellow. The tint perhaps suggests the modern, septic, industrialized context in which the figure resides. In this exhibition, Hesse's work served as a midpoint between geometric abstraction and naturalistic figurative sculpture. Irregularities in shape and neutral palettes of muted colors found in organic matter appear in repeated or geometric patterns that evoke industrialization. It was through her exploration of materials that she found what she describes as, quote, the potential, not the preconceived. In opposition to the meticulous planning involved in making hard-edged geometric pieces, her process looked to the object in progress to, quote, define or redefine the next step, or the next step combined with some vague idea. These artists expanded the notion of what plastics could look like in art, but it is unclear what benefits Owens Corning reaped from the exhibition. The same can be said for the exhibitions of plastic art presented by Hoover Chemical Company and Roman Haas, and Philip Morris and Millprint, Inc. While art made with plastic may have briefly assuaged the perception that plastics and plastic objects were merely imitators, it did not mitigate against future public image damages. Furthermore, the investment in art left the material open to the subjective communications of artists. Art further complicated plastic's public image rather than redefining it. Color variations in unprecedented shapes and degrees of opacity did not amend the fact that plastics and plastic as art were inherently devalued. As Thelma R. Newman a plastic expert and author, noted at the time, important sculpture was made from important, difficult materials, marble or bronze. Colored plastics in art emphasized what was new, experimental, or innovative about the work, but the material did not add inherent value to the work itself. Art made with plastic had far too complicated a public image in its own right to radically transform the cultural stance that plastic was the transient material of modernity. Thank you.